Takumi has been summoned to another world and finds himself standing before the goddess Nolan, but the first thing she does is sincerely apologize because this was all a huge mistake. She explains that when a summoning spell is activated, it randomly selects a bunch of losers from Earth to be isekai'd. But Takumi's life was actually going pretty well, so he was meant to be excluded from the summoning. However, an error occurred causing him to be dragged here alone with all the others. And it's all because the Holy Sidonia Empire decided to recklessly activate the summoning spell. Since Takumi was never meant to be summoned, Nolan brought him up here instead, while all the other summoned heroes went straight to Sidonia. Takumi asks her if she can just send him back to Earth since he was summoned by mistake, but unfortunately, she can't do that. She was so pissed off at Sidonia for using the forbidden summoning spell that she immediately patched it out of this world's magic laws, so no one can move between worlds anymore. And that means Takumi is stuck here permanently. The process also kinda killed him, so there's that too. Takumi starts freaking out upon realizing that he's a disembodied ghost, but only tells him he doesn't have to worry because she has a plan. She can't send him back to Earth, but she can give him a new body and have him become a citizen of this world instead. And as an apology, since this is partially her fault, she offers to grant him her blessing to make his life easier. Takumi doesn't really have much of a choice, so he agrees to be reborn into this world, and Nolan is glad to hear that because it makes this a lot easier for her. She tells him to open his status screen to check out the new life he will have, and when Takumi does, he finds out that Nolan is planning to give him a 17-year-old body, even though he's 40. Nolan tells him not to bother with the minor details, and more importantly, he still needs to pick out his job. She tells him that there are two main classes for jobs, so if Takumi wants something more combat-focused, he can pick things like swordsman, knight, or hunter. But if that doesn't appeal to him, then he could always pick one of the production jobs instead. Takumi doesn't like the idea of having to fight, so he decides to go with a production job after all. Nolan then proceeds to implant the job in his soul, along with a bunch of other bonus blessings, and sends him on his way, completely forgetting to give him a tutorial. Takumi crash lands in the middle of a forest, and after finally picking himself off the ground, he sees his reflection in the river and realizes that he really has become a different person, and he doesn't have arthritis anymore. He decides to make the best of his new life and goes to look in the bag Nolan dropped off with him to see what's inside. In the bag, he finds some food rations and some money, so it looks like he doesn't have to worry about starving for now. He then takes a look at his status screen, and it looks like Nolan really hooked him up with all the useful skills he could ever need. He even has elemental magic, so he decides to try that out first to see if he can really use it. He opens his hand and calls out water ball, and just like that, a water ball forms in his hand. The other elements work the same way, so Takumi is easily able to use them on his first try, but now he has figured out how his magic works. He has to start thinking about his next move and decides to head for the nearest village. While walking, Takumi comes across a stick in the middle of the path, and it looks like a really nice stick, so he uses his appraisal skill to scan it and finds out that this is Trent wood. It's gotten from the Treant monster, and it is really useful for making things like magic staves and spears, so Takumi decides to put his modeling skill to the test and uses it on the wood to create a spear. Since the wood works so well, Takumi decides to scan around to see if there are any other useful plants nearby, and he finds a ton of them, so he spends the next hour picking them, but now he doesn't know what to do with all these. They definitely won't fit in his bag, so he might have to leave them behind, but then Takumi remembers that he has an item box skill, so he uses it to store all the plants. Just then, he hears someone scream, and a few moments later, he sees a little girl run out of the bushes. The little girl comes to him for help because there's a monster chasing after her, and when Takumi turns to see what kind of monster it is, he finds a massive horned rabbit. The rabbit charges at him and nearly impales Takumi, but at the last second, he freaks out and accidentally stabs the rabbit in the head, killing it instantly. He is shocked that a beginner like him was able to win against a monster like that, so he assumes it must be because of Nolan's blessing, but Nolan had nothing to do with it. It was just dumb luck. As a result of his fight, Takumi earns the job title of warrior, but he's not happy about it since he was hoping to avoid fighting altogether. But that's not really important right now since he still has to check if the little girl is alright. Molly says she's fine and explains that she was out here picking herbs, but she accidentally got too far from the board village and ended up getting attacked. Upon hearing her mention a village, Takumi gets excited and asks her if it's alright for him to come to the village. Molly tells him she'll show the way, but before that, she asks if he's planning on taking that rabbit with him since their meat is really tasty. Takumi realizes it would be a waste to leave it here, So he stuffs the rabbit in his item box, but immediately after doing so, he realizes that he just did that in front of Molly, even though he was planning to keep his item box skill a secret. Well, there's nothing he can do about it now, so he and Molly start walking over to the village. And at the same time, the other people who got summoned have just arrived in the Empire of Sidonia, and they are incredibly confused about what's going on. None of them are hurt, but they have no idea where they are, and all of a sudden, they hear someone call out to them as heroes. Owen approaches and tells them that they are no longer in their original world, and that they have been summoned to use their power as heroes to save this world. She introduces herself to them as the Empress of the Sidonia Empire, Elizabeth, and one look at her face makes the kids realize that she's shady as hell. Just then, Akane's unique skill kicks in, and it seems Nolan granted her the blessing of revelation, so if she follows her gut instinct, she will naturally arrive at the right answer. And right now, Akane's gut is telling her that Elizabeth is a backstabbing bitch, so she can't be trusted. Meanwhile, Takumi has arrived in the Board Village and Molly's parents come out to thank him for saving their daughter. Molly's dad introduces himself as Banga, and his wife over here is Martha. They think Takumi is a really responsible guy to have traveled so far on his own, and on that note, Takumi asks them if it would be alright for him to stay in this village for a while since he has nowhere else to go. They tell him he is welcome to stay, but unfortunately, they don't have an inn in the village, so there's nowhere for him to stay right now. But they could always just build him a house though. All the villagers gather around an empty plot of land and are about to begin work, but Takumi wants to make himself at least somewhat useful, so he uses his earth magic to flatten the ground for the foundation. This is the first time he has used magic on such a wide scale, so he almost passes out from mana depletion. The villagers are all amazed that Takumi can use earth magic so easily, so Takumi asks if they think he just did something strange, but they tell him not to worry about it. Since he has taken care of the foundation, the rest of them get to work assembling his house for him. And by the next morning, Takumi's house has been completed. Thanks to his carpentry, blacksmithing, and sewing skills, Takumi was able to make a good set of furniture for himself. But there's something else he's been meaning to try out. He got a bunch of ores from the village blacksmith, boron, so he wants to try using alchemy to extract the metal. He's got iron ore, silver ore, copper ore, and even some magic iron ore. So he starts off with the iron and tries to make an iron ingot from it. Normally this would require a large furnace and hours of work, but with Takumi's alchemy, he can do it all at once, but it drains a ton of his mana in the process. His first attempt at ore extraction was successful, and Takumi is really excited, so he wants to keep extracting as much as possible so he can make stuff with it later. A couple of hours have gone by, so Molly comes over to Takumi's house to bring him some dinner, but when she opens the door, she is shocked to find him passed out on the floor looking like he's been sucked dry. Takumi had overdone it with the ore extraction and nearly died from mana depletion, but Martha and Banga gave him a recovery potion, so he's alright now and can keep practicing his alchemy, although they made him promise not to overwork himself anymore. Over time, Takumi extracted a bunch of iron, copper, and even a bit of gold too, so he was able to make a ton of useful tools with them. And once he was done with alchemy practice, he would spend time with Boron in the forge learning how to make all kinds of weapons. The blade turns out really well, and once Boron is done making the sheath, it will be complete. Takumi's blacksmithing skill is now at level 40, so he's done practicing that for now and decides to move on to something else. He goes over to Banga and asks if he can borrow a couple of potions, and Banga has no problem lending him some, but all the potions are basic, so he won't get much use out of them. Takumi tells him that that's fine since all he needs is a template for what a potion should look like. He's thinking of making some potions of his own with all those herbs he gathered in the forest, and Banga is happy to support Takumi in any way he can. So he offers to buy some potions from him if he completes the first batch. Takumi thanks Banga, and after he gets the basic potion, he starts working on his own version. He makes it with some hilcock leaves and water, and when he's done, he puts it in a glass jar so he can compare it to the one he got from Banga. Both of them are blue, but the one Takumi made is notably more blue than the one he got from Banga, plus it seems to have magic in it, but Takumi isn't sure if this is a success or not. He's going to have to test the potion himself to make sure it isn't harmful, but he doesn't want to end up dying if it turns out to be poisonous, so he decides to build up some poison tolerance, and the best way for him to do that is to eat whatever this is until he's about to die, and then use healing magic to cure himself. He's been doing this for a couple of hours now, and he feels like absolute shit. On the bright side, curing himself so much has granted him the purification skill, and that's definitely going to come in handy at some point. As Takumi is getting back to his feet, he hears a noise behind him and finds a massive boar staring him down. The boar clearly isn't friendly, so Takumi grabs his spear and gets ready to defend himself. But as the boar charges at him and he tries to use the spear, it shatters on contact, leaving the boar unharmed and Takumi without a weapon. He tries to use all the magic he has available to him, but none of them do any damage to the boar, so he's starting to panic here. And just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, he notices a poison spider behind him, and it looks like it's getting ready to attack, so Takumi is completely cornered. However, instead of attacking him, the spider attacks the boar instead, causing it to miss Takumi. But the boar is still coming for him, so he has to think of something fast. So far, all of his physical attacks have failed, but there's still one thing he hasn't tried yet. As the boar charges at him again, he jumps into the air, and at the moment of contact, he uses his alchemy skill on the boar's head and breaks it down. Thanks to his quick thinking, he managed to survive, and now that he's safe, he decides to go check on the spider since it helped him out earlier. The spider is in really poor shape after it got hit by the boar. He decides to heal it so it doesn't die, and afterwards, he gets up so he can return to the village, but then he receives a notification telling him that he has successfully tamed the spider. He didn't realize it was even possible to take a spider, but he's hesitant to take it with him since the spider is considered a dangerous monster. However, the spider hits him with the cutesy eyes, so he decides to accept it as his pet anyway, and to make it official, he names her Maple. A little while later, Takumi returns to the village and shows everyone the giant boar he killed. They are all amazed that he could defeat something like that, but even more so that he managed to tame a poisonous spider since no one has ever managed to do that before. That aside, Takumi suggests that they all share the boar since he can't finish it alone, so that night a massive feast is held in his honor. While everyone else is having fun, Banga brings the valuable leftovers from the boar to Takumi and tells him he can sell them for money if he heads to the nearest city, Bolton, so that will be Takumi's next destination. All the while, Goddess Nolan has been watching over him, and she's really happy with how well he is progressing. One of her fellow goddesses asks her what she's hoping to achieve by giving Takumi such special treatment. She gave him a special body, a special blessing, and on top of that, she can send him a whole year into the past, before Sidonia actually activated the summoning spell that brought him here, but Nolan says she doesn't have a particular reason for it, she's just doing what she thinks is right. This was the end of episode 1. Subscribe to not miss the next part.